Hi everyone. A few of you ask me when I do these shorts, which is what they're called on YouTube, and they're just a quick snippet of maybe an entire painting. They're very quick. They're just meant to kind of give you a glimpse of maybe a real-time tutorial that I have done. And quite often you will ask me if I can do a slowed down version of that same short. So this is one of them that a number of you have asked me about, so I thought I would go ahead and create that for you. It's somewhat simple, so let's go ahead and we'll play with that. I don't even know honestly what these might be called. I a lot of times just paint from my mind and I paint the colors that I like. So today, because I am out of, as you know, I love my Artisto pads. Being in a ring binder, I create pads for every season. I can come back and reference them. And if I do want to give this to somebody, they have perforation, so I can do that or frame it. And I just have stacks and stacks of these. It's a really good quality paper. I've tried a lot of papers, and this one is really awesome. It's thick, it doesn't warp, it's got a nice texture, so I will link those for you. And then I've got my 2 wells of water, my wash and my rinse with these beautiful Meeden products that I really love. I've got my Meeden little palette, such a great size I can hold in my hand, but yet it's still somewhat heavy. And today I'm using my Meeden watercolor paper, 100% cotton, because I am out of my Artisto pads and my MeiLang paints. My preferred paint really is Winsor Newton, but I can't afford to paint on that every day. I think for this painting I will use excuse me, my 8 Velvet Touch, just kind of has been my go-to. And I'm going to be working a lot of wet and wet, which gives you these beautiful little blurs and blends and things like this, which is what I love about watercolors. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to use my pencil and just lightly sketch. See if I can find my pencil here. My kind of flower placement, so I have somewhat of a composition. Can't find my regular drawing pencil. I love my pearl wings, but can't find that right now. So I'm going to use the rule of odds, so 3 flowers. I'll do my first one up here, and I'm going to kind of use this S composition, which is always really interesting and an easy one to go to. And of course, 5 petals. If you have watched my floral tutorial, and I'll do it on the next flower here. So there's my 5 petals. And always make sure when you're drawing your petals that you don't necessarily, or this is what I do, I try to create a little interest at the end of the petals and add these little different shapes, and just not quite like, when we were a kid and you draw a tree and just draw it like a popsicle with a big circle. So I try to do the same thing with my flowers. So here's one, and then I'll have some little buds coming out here and maybe some leaves. My next flower I'm going to put here. And if you've watched my tutorial on drawing flowers, an easy way to kind of get your petals proportioned is I just draw these little guidelines, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you have a hard time drawing a kind of in the right form or perspective, this can help you. So I just drew a circle, and then I draw these 5 guidelines out, and now I let my petals kind of follow that. And it's a great way to make sure all your petals are facing into the center of your flowers and not shifting to the side, something like that. So I just keep going around. And again, I'm making the ends or the tips of the petals kind of an interesting shape because, you know, nature is organic and that's what makes it so interesting. So I've got that one. I'm going this way. Now I'm going to come back this way for that S composition. So I'll do one more flower right here. Draw my guidelines to most flowers, I mean, a lot of flowers, I should say, are 5 petals. So here I go. Just drawing my 5 petals, making them kind of different shapes and maybe a few tucked in, something like that. And there we go. And then again, I'll have maybe some leaves coming out here, just so I'm following this S shape. Have some leaves there, maybe here, and then again coming out here. So I've got this really fun S shape that will move our eye. Now what I will do, maybe I won't unless I can find my eraser. This is a cool little eraser, by the way. It's made by Mitsubishi and I buy them in the boxes because I go through so many erasers. And it's one whole eraser and you just keep peeling the paper away and you have new eraser. So it's an inexpensive eraser, but I can't imagine I'm going to run out of it for probably a long time. And for the most part, I used to always have pencils that look like this with no eraser, chewed up. So this is kind of handy for me to do all my erasing. Of course, you can always use a kneaded eraser as well, which are really great. And I use that to lighten my lines when I draw. I keep my lines a little bit darker for you guys so you can see. So let me just keep erasing these guidelines. And I'll show you another little tip, which maybe you already do. I really don't like to use my hand to brush, sorry about that camera shake, my goodness, to remove these little eraser bits, because if I have any oil on my hand or anything, it smears and it can smear your pencil lines. So typically I just use a flat wash brush and kind of sweep off that. Okay, so let's get started. Again, this is Wet and Wet, and I'll link this for you as well. They're kind of handy. I like them, and they last forever, and they're inexpensive. So I think what I'll use here is I'm going to go to kind of some fall type colors. I have already sprayed my paints to get them activated, and I'm just going to spray my palette. There we go. And let's grab our 8 brush. And I got my water there, and let's start painting. So I'll start up here so that I'm moving down this way. A lot of times I'll tend to start here, and then I end up putting my hand in my painting. So I want to start up here. And let's go for that beautiful, in the MeiLang paints, it's rose red. Just seems to be, there's a little bit of rose madder too, or madder rose in there. And this is a really pretty pink. And I'm going to, this is, as you know, if you follow me, my favorite go-to type of technique. So I'm putting down a somewhat thicker paint like that, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to pull it out. So it's quite concentrated. I'd say probably, maybe 70% paint, 20% water, and then I rinse my brush, and I just want my brush damp. I don't want it too wet, and I'm going to pull this out. So I'm using the side of my brush with mainly water on it, and I keep rinsing it, and then using the side of my brush, I'm going into that. Now I don't want it to be all the same look. So now I went in with a drier brush and I lifted a little bit of that. Before this other one dries, which it looks like it's already doing, which is why you should always probably do one petal at a time. I'm going to go in and I'm just going to tap into that, just like that. Now you can get out the trusty old straw and blow on that, or I can blow on it like that. And then before this one dries, I'm just going to go in there with a tiny bit of water on my brush, pull that out, rinse my brush, pull it out on this side, and then I can go in and just lift a little bit out. While it's wet, I can touch in with that deeper color, and you can tilt your paper even to get some of that to spread. We can wash and rinse our brush and dry it off and pull some out. Just light pressure with the tip of this beautiful 8 brush, like that. And while this is wet, I'm going to go in with a tiny bit of this gold yellow ochre and just touch in. You want to do this while it's wet. So here it wasn't quite so wet because I waited too long, so I just dampen my brush and push and pull it out. Okay? If you want to darken this even a little bit more, you can just go in and do that. And there you go. So let's go ahead and do these other petals. I go in, I pick up some more paint at somewhat of a darker value, just meaning it has more pigment than water. Wash and rinse my brush and go in with the side of my brush and pull it out. Wash and rinse my brush again, pull it out, and then I happen to go in and I'll lift a little so I get those variation in colors. And this time before this dries, I'm just going to go in and tap in some of that yellow at the tips. Look how pretty that is. And these are all the reasons why I just love watercolors so much, because you can get these beautiful variations. Picking up a little bit more pigment and just tapping in there so we get that darker color at the base of the leaf, and we'll just keep going around. I might even pick up a little bit more paint, just applying it to the base of the petal. I do want a little bit of water on there. And again, using the side of my brush so I can get a wider brush stroke. And then picking up some of that yellow and tapping in while it's wet. Look at that. And you can tilt your paper if you want to get a little bit more of that spread. And now we'll do this last petal here. There we go. We could even, let's do this real quick. I'm going to pick up some of that purple. And let's see what happens if we tap in to the base. Now, this is a little bit dry, but look how pretty that is. You know, play with those color mixes. A blue might be pretty in there. We'll pick up some more of that pink, go back to what we did on the others. Now, if this would have been wetter, that purple would blend a little bit more. Using the side of my brush and pulling that through. If you notice, I love my white space, so I have white space in my petals, because that's just kind of my thing. And then tapping in with that yellow. There we go. Now before that dries, I want to go in and just place a couple leaves. So we all end up with our go-to greens that we like. Mine is a sap green or tree green in MeiLiang. Sap green in Winsor. And I want a little bit cooler green, so I'm going to take more of the sap green. See how that's a little bit cooler? That olive green has a little bit of warmth in it. Let's clean up my mess here. There we go. And using the tip of my brush, very light pressure, and look, oh, I love that. Point press. There we go. Point press. And I might even add in just a tiny bit of the pink. I always enjoy putting some of the color of my flower into my leaves. I think that's really pretty, and it makes it look like the leaf isn't so completely separate from the flower. So let's do our leaf on this side of our S. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of that green and do this leaf here, which actually this one, I'm going to add in some little berries. Maybe I'll use that purple color. I didn't put that in here either. And that kind of brings together too. If you notice, I just washed off some of that pigment so I get some interest here. And then let's go in with that green and create the little branches. There we go. And I like when they blend in with that little bud. So for me, that's perfectly okay. And there you go. I might even add some more. I can. Something like that. So there is the top of our S, and now we're coming around this way. I'm going to add maybe a couple little petals there. I don't want to, if you think you have too much water on your brush, just tap it off. See how much water came off? And let's create a leaf there. Something like that. Okay. Felt like I wanted to thicken that up a bit. And we'll come back to it and see if we need to do something else there. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to this flower. We're going to do the same technique. So I'm going to pick up that Rose Madder or maybe Quin Magenta in your Winsor Newton palette. And I'm going to try and do 2 petals again, but you have to kind of work fast because once it dries, it's not going to spread. So wash and rinse my brush. There we go. And again, I leave some of that white space. Just my thing. You don't have to, but I think it creates some really fun interest in my petals. And now while that's wet, pick up some of that cad yellow or maybe even some cad orange or yellow ochre, whatever color you'd like. And I'm going to tap in just to the tip of my brush. And there you go. Let's keep going. Go in here. And this first color that I put down, it's quite a little bit thicker. It doesn't have as much water. And a lot more paint than water. And then pulling it around using the side of my brush, wash and rinse. Pull this around, and if I feel it's too much, I can always go in and lift with a dry or clean, damp brush. Now see right there, I didn't have enough water. So I want to get some more water on my brush. There we go. Look how interesting that is. Wash and rinse my brush, go in with my yellow. And keep in mind too, it's interesting when all your petals are a little bit different. So some might be darker than others, some might have more white than others. Just keep it interesting. Blooms for me are okay because in nature blooms are there, very organic. Okay, wash and rinse my brush, side of my brush, wash and rinse, side of my brush, and there we go. Now with a little bit of that yellow and tap in. So wet and wet, you do have to kind of work a little bit quicker, just so that, and we'll go in with that purple again too. I think that was really pretty. And that would just be a violet in your Winsor Newtons. Now I might get a little bit, see, I'm getting a little bit more of a spread because my petals are wetter. I waited a little bit longer in this one, but look how pretty that is. It really spreads out. I think that's real interesting. And then we'll go in here, let's turn our paper, and create some leaves in here so that we're taking our eye from here, we're guiding it around, and then we're going to come here for that beautiful S composition shape. So let me grab some of my green. And point, press, point, press. Maybe have a little bit of a vine here. Press. And again, I love when my petals and my leaves kind of merge together. I think that's really pretty. Maybe a little one there, something like that. Just guiding the eye around. Wash and rinse my brush, and I might just add in a little bit of the color of that flower into that leaf. Now that was a little much. I don't think I quite wanted that much. So I'll just pick a little up. And it just, again, brings that beautiful coherency. Okay, well, we have one more flower here. So let's go into that beautiful pink and just repeat that process. There we go. Wash and rinse my brush. I'm working pretty wet here today, if you notice. You know, just play. One day, maybe work lighter. One day, work less water. Just discover, play. There we go. Just adding in little dots of that brighter pink. And look how much of a spread I got with that purple because I went into this flower when it was still wet. So I got a lot more interesting effects here. Go in with that yellow. Just barely touching in, keeping the edges of my petals very organic. And go in, do these. Maybe do this one here. Be careful, maybe do one petal at a time because if it dries, it's much harder to obviously spread. There we go. Don't want to put my hand in that. Like that. I just love these yellows and pinks together. I know they're a very common combination on our YouTube channels here, but they are so pretty together. I just can't resist. So there we go. We have one more petal here. Just going in. Wash and rinse my brush. Use the side of my brush. Pull that out. There we go. And I can certainly go in and lift some of that, so I'm just using kind of a dry brush and lift. Then go in with my yellow. There we go. And let's do our leaves first this time instead of that center purple. So we want to come around this way. So I'm going to use the tip of my brush, very light pressure. And this is where your brush stroke practice comes so handy, because you want to know and be familiar and have that muscle memory of how much pressure to add on to get that nice thin brush stroke. There you go. Painting kind of at an odd angle here. Now I think what I'll do is add a little bit of those purple here and here, so our eye keeps moving. Right now it's kind of just stuck up there where that purple is, and we don't want that. We want it to continue to move. So let's grab a little bit of that purple. Ooh, that violet is really violet, you guys. And maybe just add a couple here, kind of leading our eye around. Something like that. So our eye keeps moving, and then we'll add more down here. Down here. I think the tutorial I did actually had a lot more like little squiggles and things, kind of like that, which you can do that. That's pretty too. It almost looks like a fun little hyacinth. And I'm not freaking out because that's kind of blending in with the green. Wash and rinse my brush and pick up some green. And let's draw our stem here. There we go. Maybe point press. Point press. Just kind of filling in. Very light pressure, and let's draw our little stems here. Now, oh, let's go in and do that center too, that purple. And being careful, because that center purple is really quite strong. So there we go. Now what I want to do, because there's a lot of the same values, and what happens when we have the same values is it can look somewhat flat. So let's go in and pick up more paint than water. So we have a darker value, and let's just go in and just create some little petals, I'm sorry, leaves, using those darker values. Something like that. And this too will also guide our eye around our picture. So it's drawing our eye around. it's saying, oh, there's some dark, there's some more dark, there's purple, there's more purple, and we're keeping this beautiful flow. I feel like right here we could, let's see, we could add in maybe a little petal here. Not petal, sorry, leaf. So I'm really kind of looking at my composition, and it's like, yeah, it's a little skinny and scrawny here, so maybe I want to add something different in there. So I just do that, but I'm keeping the form of this S still going, which is what we want to do. Something like that, but I'm filling in a little bit. So I might even go in and add a little bit more purple here. There we go. And then for the center of these flowers, I think what I'll do is some more of that yellow, because we've got yellow in the outer leaves. So I think that could be interesting to have some yellow in the middle. And I could have even done this when it was wet, and we would have gotten, like right here, a beautiful spread of that. It would have flowed into the petals a little bit more. Because I'm doing it when it's dry, it's wet on dry, so there's not a lot of flow. Now you could certainly leave this just like this. What I like to do is I like to go in and add some layers. So I might pick up some of that pink color, which again could be your Quin Magenta, Permanent Rose, in MeiLiang, it's Rose Madder. And I'm going to go in and just add with the side of my brush, because for me, if I'm making a petal and it doesn't have a point at the end, I want to use the side of my brush so I get a more rounded petal. So I'm just going to go in and do that. And just add in some interesting value changes. Rinse my brush a little, and I can soften that, because just for me, I don't like these hard lines, so that's just kind of my thing. Using the side of my brush. Maybe the tip of my brush to add a few. So I really don't like those hard lines, so I'm going to go in and just soften that. But it adds this beautiful coloring. We could even do that with a little bit of the yellow. Look how pretty that is. Let them mix together. But now I don't want to do every petal, because then they're all going to look the same. And my goal here is to create some different values. So look at how much that popped out where I put the darker values compared to this one, which is all the same value and a little bit flatter. So I'll go in here, do the same thing. And I love this technique of glazing like that in layers. Maybe a little bit of that yellow. And letting them blend together. Being careful not to overwork everything too much, of course. This could get away from me really easily. I think what I'll do too is add in a little bit touch of burnt sienna or burnt umber, any brown you have, into the center. And it might create a tiny bit of depth in the middle of the flower. Because again, for me, I like everything to blend. I don't like these hard dots that are real crisp. So I like that better for me. You may like the other look, and that's fine. Now in this picture, I did go in and I put some dots at the end of the leaves. I put some lines. You could certainly do that. My painting is wet, so I don't want to do that right now because it may ruin it, but you can certainly do that. You could even do maybe some splatters. That could be pretty. So there you go. All right, everybody, I hope that was fun for you and you give this a try. I will list all of my supplies below, and I will also create a little tutorial kit for you. All right, thanks so much. Have fun.